Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today is part 2 of my pork loin experiment. I'm trying to find the best recipe for a juicy and tender pork loin. Today I'm brining my meat and then roasting it in the oven. And it smells really good so far, so let's see how it turns out. Just like part 1, which I will link in my description box below, I'm starting with a half pork loin from Aldi. This is over 4.5 pounds, and we were going away this weekend, so I didn't want to have a lot of leftovers, so I cut it in half and just used about a 2-pound portion of pork. Then I created my brine. So I started with 4 cups of water, which is a quart of water, and to that I added a 1/4 cup of salt into this Ziplock bag. So a brine is a mixture of both salt and sugar in water, and the salt is going to penetrate into your meat as it sits in there for hours. It's going to help it retain moisture as it cooks later in the oven, but also it'll give it great flavor too. Speaking of flavor, I added 2 crushed garlic cloves and about a teaspoon of rosemary leaves, and I like to rub them between my fingers as I added them to the bag because this kind of releases the flavor of the dried herb. I also added in a 1/4 cup of brown sugar earlier too. And then I squished this all together to help dissolve the sugar and the salt into the water. I also had about a teaspoon of whole black peppercorns on hand, so I just threw those in there as well. Then I added my pork loin, removed some of the extra air from the bag and zipped it up, and then mixed it around again with my hands just to get the marinade kind of working into the meat. Anytime I'm marinating meat in a bag, I like to place it on a plate before I pop it into the fridge. Just in case the bag starts to leak, you don't have a huge mess all over the shelves in your fridge. So my pork loin went into the fridge for a good 8 hours or so. I did this very early in the morning, and then closer to cook time, I started prepping all the other ingredients. I sliced up 1 gala apple and 1 sweet onion. I used baking spray on the inside of my 9x13-inch glass baking dish just so nothing would stick, and then I removed my pork loin from the refrigerator and I patted it dry very thoroughly with paper towels. I placed the pork loin into my baking dish and then scattered the sliced onions and apples all around. I also decided to add in a few prunes as well, which are dried plums, and they give this great chewy texture and also a nice sweetness to the dish. And of course, pork pairs so well with anything sweet, whether it's apple sauce or the sliced apples or this glaze that I'm going to put over top, which is just a tablespoon of Dijon mustard and maple syrup. You stir those together, brush it over the top, and it adds a little extra layer of flavor. It is so yummy. So here are the prunes that I mentioned earlier. And then I added probably about a 1/4 cup of chicken broth into the bottom of the pan, just to add a little bit of moisture so that the onions and apples wouldn't burn. I roasted the pork loin in the oven at 400 degrees for the first 10 minutes. Then I reduced the heat to 350 and cooked it for an additional 20 minutes per pound, so another 40 minutes or so. And I was looking for an internal temperature of at least 145 degrees. That's kind of the new minimum. It used to actually be closer to 160, but with my research online, I found that 145 is safe to eat with pork, but I just felt more comfortable cooking it a little bit longer. So I covered my meat with foil, allowing it to rest for an additional 10 minutes, and my ultimate internal temperature was around 155 degrees. And I think you can see really well here that this pork loin retained a lot of moisture. I was super excited to try it out. Tastes really delicious. Probably not as tender as the other pork loin, but much more moist. So if there's a way to marry the two recipes together, that would be the perfect recipe, but this still tastes really good too. So my first pork loin I pan-seared and then cooked low and slow in my crock pot, and it just fell apart. It was so tender, but it wasn't quite as juicy as the second one that I roasted in the oven. However, when you put that sauce on top, that adds a lot of moisture, and it just had great flavor. It was really delicious. Now this pork loin I thought had incredible flavor. I loved the brining technique. It retained a lot of its juiciness, but it was not quite as tender as the crock pot meat. So I think that the winner in this experiment is the crock pot pork loin. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe, and give this video a thumbs up if you liked my pork loin recipe today. Thank you so much for joining me here in my kitchen, and I'll see you again soon with more family recipes.